topic today is the novel and the private self. And there is also in your book a comparison between the act of reading in the 18th century and what reading is today. So let's start with an idea that was developed by Walter Benjamin, a German critic, that the novel is a product of solitude. What's the meaning of that? That a writer had to be able to concentrate when writing his novel, but also the reader needed this a kind of solitude. And remember that in English, the word solitude has a positive nuance of meaning. Of course, in order to be able to enjoy the solitude and the novel as a form of entertainment, you needed to have a book, and books were printed, but at the same time, they were extremely expensive. So only if you had money, you could buy books and enjoy the pleasure of reading. At the same time, you also needed time, because if you had to work all day long because you weren't rich enough and you had to provide for your family, you couldn't have time for reading. But also space. Space was necessary to concentrate. It's very hard to read when there are people around you. And there is a third element that is, last but not least, that is sufficient light, because in order to read, you need night. And since light at that time was scanty, it wasn't obvious to have the light necessary to read, which means that novel became the form of culture and entertainment for the emerging urban middle classes. Why? Because privacy and isolation were possible to them. Thanks to their wealth, the economic prosperity they were gaining. Not only, don't forget that there was also kind of isolation, especially of women, because people belonging to the middle classes were segregated, kind of segregated in residential areas that were far from the rest of the city, that was populated by the lower classes, especially in London. We had the East End that was characterized by the presence of the underclasses. But the topic of the novel wasn't the stories, the fantastic stories of kings and queens, or their deeds, or of heroes, but urban life. So life in the city. And the city was interesting because it was made up of isolated individuals, but at the same time, it was also possible to come into contact with people coming from different environments. This is something that both Defoe and Fielding did. Not only, we also, thanks to the novel, can see the private world of a certain group of people, because thanks to the novel, this is described in detail. There are also other elements that helped the development and the growth of reading. The fact that people started to write a lot of personal letters. Why? Because this allowed them to talk to friends without going out. Also because there was an improvement in the postal service, who was a category of people that mostly used to write letters, especially middle-class women that were becoming more and more literate and didn't have the possibility to be so free as to go out and enjoy life. So they had their own space in which they could be secluded and had to dedicate themselves to writing and especially to reading. This was possible because in the Georgian houses, there was a possibility of having this private space I was talking before. That is, masters and servants lived in separate areas of the house. So each member of a middle-class family had their own room, which means that you can be locked there and start fantasizing. Today is a bit different, because even if our homes allow us to have a room of our own, at the same time, the fact that we read less and less in books, but we belong to the world of social media, it means that solitude is a difficult experience nowadays, but especially to some people undesirable. People need now to be always connected.